mind sharing your story?
Yeah. So, and every time I talk about our loss, I get really cold. So just like
Oh.
prepared and ready. Just part of the physiological like trauma response. So my husband and I had been married for a little over a year. Neither of us were sure we wanted children. I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, so I had been told from the time I was pretty young that I would probably struggle to get pregnant or have children at all. And I was never the woman that thought, I want to be a mom one day. Um, I wasn't against it, but it just was not, some women know. And I thought, well, if we have children, great. And if we don't, that's okay. I'll still have a full and beautiful life.
Mm.
So shortly after getting married, we decided to try. We were kind of the mentality, we'll give it a try. If we get pregnant, cool. And if we don't, then that's cool too. And I just thought it would not work because of years of being told that having PCOS meant I wouldn't be able to get pregnant.
Mm.
We got pregnant pretty quickly. So in the
Wow.
summer of 2016, we just bought our first house and we'd been living there for a week. And I found out I was pregnant. And we were both super excited, but also like in shell shock, like, oh, that happened really quickly. Okay, here we go. So the pregnancy was pretty normal. I told a few people, but the common
Yeah.
misconceptions are once you hit 12 weeks, everything is fine. And that's when you should tell everyone. So around 12 weeks, which I actually got the Facebook reminder on Tuesday. So 5 years ago on September 7th, I announced on Facebook that we were pregnant with our first child. And from there, it was, everything was pretty normal. We had an ultrasound at 8 weeks, and they told one of the pictures our baby looked like a little elephant. So I started joking that I was pregnant with an elephant. And so now we have elephants all over. I mean, I wear elephants are kind of our thing now. I had one weird incident around 16 weeks, but I did not go to the hospital for it. My midwife just kind of talked me through it on the phone. And there's a lot of wondering now if I had gone to the hospital and I'd had an ultrasound, if we would have, known what was going wrong. But there's no way to know at this point. So at 21 weeks, we went in for our anatomy scan. We were not going to find out what we were having. We wanted it to be a surprise. So we went in, and I'd never had an ultrasound before. So it just seemed normal that they were taking a lot of pictures and it seemed to go really long. And the ultrasound technician, she was in a fine mood. It just seemed normal. And then at one point she said, your baby is very active. I'm going to go get another tech to help me get a few pictures that I can't seem to get on my own, which seemed normal. So they took some more pictures and gave us our pictures. And this was on November 9th of 2016. And so we left. And I went home and took a nap. And when I woke up, I had a voicemail from my midwife. So I tried to call her back and missed her. And she finally got in touch with me around 2ish in the afternoon. And this is like the moment where, for me, it's like the delineation of where my life changed, where like the end of who I once was and the beginning of like who I am now, I guess. I was sitting in our kitchen. I was standing actually, and the afternoon, like fall sun was coming in through the window, and it was really like a beautiful day. And I was on the phone with her, and she said, are you sitting down? And I sat down, and I just knew as soon as she said that I was about to get bad news. So she started reading off a list of all the malformations that our child had. And there were so many that I could not keep up. I have a professional background in sports medicine, so some of the things she was saying like made sense to me, but then there were some words like umcephaly that I was like, can you send this to me? Can you like send me an email? I don't know how to spell some of this stuff. I've never heard of some of these things. Like, I'm very overwhelmed. There were 8 things on the list that had not formed correctly. And she canceled all of our appointments. And I was like, are you sure? And she said, Emily, I have no idea what this is. I have to send you to a specialist. I've never seen this many malformations in one ultrasound scan. I have no idea. You have to see a specialist. So that was on a Wednesday. We drove over to Missoula, which again is about an hour and a half away, because that's where the fetal maternal medicine specialist is, or the maternal fetal medicine, the specialist. And we were there for about 3.5 hours. They did more ultrasounds and then sat us down and said, your child either has trisomy 13, which is a chromosomal it's chromosomal, like trisomy 23 or trisomy 21 is Down syndrome. Trisomy 13 is also a malformation, in the genetic code, but it is fatal. Trisomy 13 is. So your baby either has trisomy 13 or limb body wall complex. So at this point, when I normally tell our story, I really like to encourage people not to look up limb body wall complex, because all the pictures on the internet are very gruesome. Wow. So I, like when he said limb body wall complex, he said it kind of fast, and I was like, I like literally have no idea what just came out of your mouth. What did you just say? So he walked us through what limb body wall complex is, and it's basically a malformation as the body starts to basically close and create a body cavity. And our son's head had closed, and we didn't know at that point that we were having a son. So his head had closed and his chest cavity had closed. So his heart was working, but he had no bladder. All of his remaining internal organs were outside of his body in what's called an encephaly. His spine had not formed correctly. He had no bladder. And because the abdominal wall defect was so low, he also had no sex organs. He had arms and legs, and he was swallowing. So there was also a lot of extra fluid, and his umbilical cord didn't have enough vessels in it. So there were just lots of complications, but he was alive. So at this point, I was a little over 21 weeks pregnant, and basically they had to do an amniocentesis to rule out whether or not it was limb body wall or trisomy 13. Trisomy 13 would show up in an amnio with a genetic panel, chromosomal panel, and limb body wall is just a diagnosis of exclusion. So we had the amnio, and then we had to wait. So that was on a Friday. I had to wait the whole weekend. And over the weekend, I put a will together for myself, worked with a friend here in town who very quickly got us in and put a will together just in case I died. Because there were lots of, at that point, my health was not in jeopardy, but at any point, anything could have happened. His encephaly could have ruptured. There were just so many things, and I could have become septic or hemorrhaged internally right away. Wow. So on Tuesday, we got the call that there was nothing wrong genetically. There were no chromosomal abnormalities. So they officially diagnosed him with limb body wall complex. And that's when we also found out it was a boy through the amnio. So then we had to go back to do a few more scans and talk with the doctor about what's next. So we spent hours with our physician and with a visiting physician who is also a fetal medicine specialist, discussing the options. And we finally came to the decision that I was not going to carry him to term. Limb body wall is fatal. It's very rare. There's not much known about it. And even though he was alive, the way that his body had formed would have meant a lot of things would have had to happen as soon as he was born. A lot of surgeries. He probably wouldn't. Most babies with rare conditions like this, you don't carry to term, so they're born premature anyway. They would have had to do a surgery to create a penis and an anus and a bladder. They would have had to put all of his organs back in his body. But the main thing for us was that the way his spine had formed, there was 100% certainty from all the doctors that looked at our scans that he would be in pain as soon as he could feel pain. So they weren't, everyone is kind of up in the air about whether babies can feel pain in utero. So we weren't sure if he was in pain yet, but that once he was born, he would be in pain. And we made the decision to induce early. There is a time limit to induce early due to laws. So we had no time to really think about it. We just had to make a decision, because if you wait too long, then there are repercussions for you. So that was on a Tuesday. We checked into the hospital on Friday, and they started the induction. I was 22 weeks and 4 days pregnant when Cohen was born. I was in labor for 30 hours. When he was born, he was stillborn, so he died during labor, which lasted about a half hour. So during like actual delivery was about a half hour, and he did die. He hadn't been dead for very long once he was born. He still had some reflexes. So one of my favorite memories that when they gave him to me and I got to hold him and do skin to skin with him, I put my finger in his hand, and his hand still had reflex enough to grab my finger. So I think a lot of people have no idea what happens when a child dies, as far as like what happens next. And we spent the rest of the evening with him. My parents had flown in from Georgia. My sister flew in from Texas, and my brother flew in from Georgia. And they were all there. My husband's family was not able to come. They wanted to, but they were not able to come. But they were all there with my husband and I. So they got to meet our son, who we named Cohen Daniel Ta-soni. It was right after Leonard Cohen died that this all happened. And my husband was like, we should name him Leonard. In like a moment of humor, I was like, we cannot name our dead child Leonard. That is a name you have to grow into. Like, you can't just give a child the name of Leonard. So we decided on Cohen. And Daniel is my father's middle name. So Cohen Daniel Ta-soni. And we got to spend the rest of the evening with him, which for some people might sound grotesque, but it was, when that's the only time you will ever get to spend with your child, it doesn't matter that they're dead. So we spent the rest of the evening. He was born at almost 6 p.m. on November 19th, right before Thanksgiving. And they kept him in the NICU overnight so that when we woke up, they brought him back in, and we got to spend the rest of the morning with him. And they did plaster molds of his arms and legs and hands and feet for us. Handprints, footprints. And when you lose a child at the hospital, they send you home with a box. And most of the time it's put together by other mothers or parents that have lost children. And so there's lots of little things in there. There's lots of information about support groups across the country. Locally, there's little hand knit things that you can put your children in, whether it's to bury them or to take pictures. And since they know you're leaving the hospital without a baby, it's just like a physical thing to be able to carry so that you're not leaving empty handed. They also had, most hospitals, when you lose a child, have a photographer that you can call, and they will come take pictures for free of your child. So we did have that, which was lovely. But of course, there will never be enough pictures. I mean, we all took pictures as well, but that's it. Like, those are the only pictures that, we have of our son. Um, I can't remember if I already said this. So Cohen was 1 pound. He was 10.5 inches long, so he was tiny. My husband is a redhead, and I really wanted redheaded babies. And Cohen, he was still very dark colored because he was so early, so premature, but he had tiny little red eyelashes. And I mean, we don't know what color his eyes were because he was too early, and he never opened his eyes. So we decided to have him cremated, and we got to say our goodbyes to his physical body. And then we left the hospital, and drove home. And then we had to celebrate Thanksgiving. It was just like, I mean, my mom and dad and brother and sister stayed at our house and celebrated with, I mean, I was in a total fog. I also, I used to work for the state health department and worked with our statewide milk bank for donated breast milk. So I knew that I was going to have a milk supply, and I planned on breastfeeding. So I also pumped for a month, and I donated my breast milk to a local nonprofit, which was really terrible and also very healing for me to know that even though I didn't get to nourish my own child with my breast milk, that I was at least able to offer that as a gift to someone else. And I think it was also helpful for me in my own like physical healing. Yeah, and then began the journey of how in the hell do you move forward in life after such an experience? Kind of everything seemed trivial. If someone would complain about something, I would be like, I literally was in labor for 30 hours and I gave birth to my dead son. So like, just perspective.
Yeah.
Which I'm not as rigid about that anymore because, in my own grief journey, I realized that's like not fair to do to people because, people have hardship and it doesn't have to be the same as mine to be hard. But it was and has continued to be a journey and a process, and there's no linear grief. It's all over the place. You don't know which stage you're in. Maybe you start a new stage and you're like, oh shit, I was in serious anger stage. Whoa.
Wow.
But like, you don't really know when you're in it. And then really trying to like get to know the new person that you are, because you cannot be the same after an experience like that. So I think that's like the basic overview. Our Cohen is in an urn in our bedroom.
Wow.
And this November 19th will be 5 years since he was born.
Wow.
And every year as we get closer, I think, what the hell do we do this year to celebrate his birthday? So starting to think up plans of what do we do to celebrate 5 years?
Wow. I love that name, Cohen.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
cute. I don't think I've ever heard that one before.
Mm.
What You go home.
Mhm.
I can't even imagine. But what's the first thing you do?
I, I don't really remember. I mean, thankfully, my family was around, so they took care of like the house and things for a week. And then one of the things that was most impactful for us, and this is something I always suggest to people when they say, "Oh, somebody I know has lost someone or has lost a child or lost a parent and I don't know what to do." I always say send food because
Right.
trying to like prepare food and eat and go to the grocery store and like remember to do the basic things just like you just don't remember. So one of my very good friends set up a meal train for 3 months.
Wow.
Like every other day, people were dropping food on our doorstep, um, which was huge
Yeah.
because I didn't have the full capacity. I mean, part of it is, you know, you're in shock right away. And so you know what has just happened, but the full weight of it hasn't hit yet. So I was still trying to function normally, like trying to run my business and trying to, for me, I am an avid exerciser and have been for most of my life. So I did continue to go to the gym
Wow.
um, because I needed, that was like my mental escape. Actually, that also, I felt like there's humor in the things that most people wouldn't find humor in, but this is just how you like survive child loss. So
Yeah, yeah.
about 10 days after he was born, I went to the gym and I love to do the cycle studio, right? Like stationary biking.
Yeah.
So I went and did about a 10-minute cycle because, you know, I just gave birth, so I'm not going to like go crazy.
Yeah.
And there was an older man in there on a bike near me, and when I got off, he said, "Oh, you're not going to go for any longer?" And I just whipped my head around and said, "I just gave birth 10 days ago." And he was like, "Oh, oh, okay." Just like little moments like that where I had to really like use my personality to protect myself because otherwise it just would have been, it could have gone downhill quickly.
Yeah.
But the meal part was huge, having people contribute food so that Joe and I could function. And you know, there's so much to it, right? Like everyone told me that my husband and I would process the grief differently.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it was pretty similar. We cried a lot together. There were certain like TV shows and movies we couldn't watch anymore because there would be like a mention of a dead child, and I would be like, turn it off. And then I would just go cry for the rest of the night. Um, but eventually the like processing of the grief becomes so different between he and I, and it still is now to this day. So that was like a whole nother thing that had to be processed, was learning how to understand his grief and him understand my grief, and us like still communicate with each other and hold space for how the other one was grieving and continues to grieve. Um, but I mean, the reality was I just needed some normalcy. So I still tried to do as normal as possible the things that I could. Um, Going out in public became really difficult because I had been, you know, everyone knew I was pregnant
Yeah.
and not everyone knew that we had lost our son. So I would go in public and people would be like, when are, when are you, you know, and I would just like, so I would just like cry in the grocery store, just like
Oh.
cry in the middle of places when I would run into people and they would be like, what, where'd your belly go? What is, and I'd be like, oh, oh, we had, yeah, Cohen, he was born, he's dead. Yep, thanks. Can I finish grocery shopping now? Like,
Wow.
just, but the other big thing for me was I started asking for connections to other people, that other women specifically that had lost children. So I was having a lot of grief dates. So I would be like, hey, hey, we have a mutual friend that said you lost a baby. Do you want to go cry together in a coffee shop? So I
I
did
love
a
that.
lot of that, of like meeting new friends. And the reality was, I started making new friends with women who had dealt with miscarriage and infertility and child loss and the whole spectrum.
Wow.
And being able to relate and like truly like cry together in public was life giving for me.
Wow.
Um, and then starting the support group and have being able to put energy into that was really helpful. Like put my heartbreak into something that could be positive was super helpful.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
What were you able to find in community, which is what you're kind of talking about, that you weren't able to find anywhere else? Sharing stories, how did that help?
So I think when it comes to loss, most people don't know how to support someone
I
because
don't.
yeah. Which was me too. Like I would say that was 100% me previous to this experience. I mean, I would like reach out to the person shortly after losing whoever they lost, whatever the circumstances were, and it would be on my mind from time to time. But I would always think, they're probably so overwhelmed. I probably shouldn't reach out. They probably have so many people taking care of them. And the reality was, in that first 6 months, some of my best friends didn't even reach out. And some of the people that I thought would reach out, I should say, I just never heard from, or I heard like, right at the beginning and then nothing. And I felt like, doesn't everyone know that I am like dying over here? Doesn't
Wow.
everyone know that like my body thinks I should still be pregnant and I'm still going through the third trimester? And now Cohen's due date has arrived and now I'm going through the fourth trimester. I mean, when I got to my due date, which was in March, uh, in that month, I started having phantom preterm labor, phantom. I mean, just all the things you think. You wake up in the night and you feel like there's a baby kicking you, and there's, just all the things. Like, just there's so much
Wow.
to it. Yeah, I mean, when you lose a child, whether it's early miscarriage or a situation like ours, your body still thinks you're pregnant. So you still go through all the phases of pregnancy and delivery, and like it was insane.
Wow.
And there were so many people that I just didn't hear from. And I didn't have the capacity to reach out and say, I need you to support me.
Yeah.
But then there were so many people that I did hear from that, not that I didn't expect it, but maybe we weren't as close of friends or connections previously. And then they would reach out every week or every 2 weeks and say, I'm just thinking about you. How are you doing? Do you want me to drop anything off? Can I put anything in the mail to you? So initially it was like, just getting a deeper understanding of who understood and who I could connect with without having to do a lot of explaining about the support I needed. And then when I started to meet these other mothers that had also dealt with losing their children, they just got it. They're like, "Yeah, girl, what do you need? What do you need me to drop at your house? When you call me in the middle of the night, whenever
Wow.
you want to get together, let me know," right? They just totally understood that I needed to sit down and cry and not have anyone try and fix it. I didn't need anyone to say, it's going to be okay. You can move forward from this. I needed somebody to be like, this fucking sucks. I can't believe you had to go through this, but I will sit here in this really uncomfortable space with you because nobody can fix it. And there's nothing anyone can say that makes it better. There's no like, you know, catchphrase or condolences that people try and use to make themselves feel more comfortable that made me feel better,
Yeah.
other than to just say, this sucks. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to sit here with you. And if there is something you need that I can do, please tell me. Um, and I just found that with this group of women that I started meeting with through our support group. And that gave me a lot more confidence to be able to say to my friends and my family, what I did need in terms of their support. Um, and and it's also allowed me to be able, I've been very, very vocal about our loss and grief and what I, my struggles continue to be and have been through this journey. And um, I really want people to know that when you have someone who's lost someone, so
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a child or someone else, you reaching out to them to say, I was thinking about you. I'm really sorry about, the loss of your child or the loss of your mother or whatever. A lot of times, as the person sending that message, we think, oh, if I send them this message, it might make them sad because I'm bringing it up. And what I want people to know is we're thinking about it all the time. Like, my son is
Right.
always on my mind. Like,
Yeah.
it's never like a moment of I get a text message and I'm like, oh shit, I hadn't thought about that in weeks.
Right.
Never.
Yeah.
So it's so refreshing to me when someone remembers Cohen because nobody got to meet him other than my husband and I and my immediate family. So of course, no one's really going to remember him because no one met him, right? And like we
Mm-hmm.
didn't get to spend living time with him, so who knows what he was like as a person. But to have people say, I get texts a lot that are like, I saw this beautiful picture of an elephant and I thought of you and I thought of Cohen because again, like elephants is just that's what we have adopted as our animal to represent Cohen, and we have just animals everywhere, elephants everywhere. I love that kind of stuff. It
Mm-hmm.
just makes my heart sing to know that if I had two living children, because we did have another child and he is healthy, thriving, upstairs running around like a wild animal. Um, if I had two living children, people would remember both of them. But I have one invisible, invisible to the world child and one living child. And I'm still a mom of two. I just don't get to physically parent one of my children. Yeah.
100%. 100%.